Our spring game's dead. It's kind of an unfortunate situation, right? Because I always really look forward to spring games, by the way. I for one, am one of those sickos that is going to sit there and watch in May when I'm just desperate for any type of football. Like, okay, yeah, I'll watch college baseball in May. I will. I enjoy it. I like it. I'll watch golf. You know, there's some major championships that are being played in April with the Masters, and we have the PGA in May. Like, yeah, there's a lot to look forward to in May. But you know what May has been for me the last 10 years? It's like spring game central. I'll watch 60 of them. It's sickening, and I know I have a problem. I acknowledge that. The first step of realizing you have a problem is admitting that you have a problem. But I like watching spring games. Are sometimes they misleading? Yeah, they can be very misleading. There have been times where I've sat there at media days or during a show on College Football Live in July, and I've told you, this kid's going to be amazing. Did you see what he did in the spring game? And then he never plays. So yeah, that's happened. And I am always mindful of that. But with the era that we're in right now, I really believe that spring games are reaching, to the point of kind of no return. And this all started this past week with Matt Rule. And Matt Rule came out and said Nebraska is going to cancel their spring game because of tampering and all these other reasons. So let's have a listen to the head coach of the Nebraska Cornhuskers, Matt Rule.
And I think it's really fundamentally, I hate to say it like this, it's really because, last year we're one of the more televised. We were one of the more televised spring games, and I dealt with a lot of people offering our players a lot of opportunities after that. So to go out and bring in a bunch of new players and then showcase them for all the other schools to watch, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The word tampering doesn't exist anymore. It's just absolute free, open, common market, and so I don't necessarily want to open up to the outside world. I don't want these guys all being able to watch our guys and say, wow, he looks like a pretty good player. Let's go get him.
Okay. One, I can't blame him at all. And this is not the first time we've seen this. We saw this last year with Ole Miss, where they basically had a spring festival instead of a game. They had tug of war and they had slam dunk contests. Like, they had fun, I guess, activities for the players to participate in, but they didn't want to put tape out there and have their players potentially light it up. And now all of a sudden they're having to deal with guys potentially entering the portal in May when you thought for sure you were going to have them on your roster heading into the fall a couple months later. So the elimination of spring games appears to be the result of tampering, injuries, and the amount of NIL earnings that a lot of these players might have access to. And Nebraska is not the only one, by the way. UCF, they said they will not hold a traditional spring game this year. Some of their concerns are the same ones that Matt Rule echoed just a day or two ago. But the main reason, let's just call it what it is. I mean, the main reason why these guys don't want to play is they don't want tampering to be done with their roster. And this started a couple years ago with the Texas Longhorns. You might not remember, but if you're a spring game psycho like me, you remember the performance that Malik Murphy had in the Texas spring game. He was, at that time, Quinn Ewers was the established starter, and Malik Murphy was battling it out with some relatively unknown prospect named Arch Manning. And Malik Murphy went out there and lit it up in the spring game. And everyone's like, hang on, it's like Arch was supposed to be the guy that lit it up in the spring game. But no, it was Malik Murphy, who at 6'5", 240 pounds, huge arm. You're sitting there like, this guy's unbelievable. He goes out, goes 9 of 13 for 165, threw it deep and hit guys in stride way downfield. And you're sitting there thinking like, man alive, this guy might be more talented than Quinn. I mean, you're thinking that. And granted, it's a spring game, so it's a little artificial, but it still had to be taken into account. Well, guess what? Malik Murphy goes out, lights it up. All of a sudden, everyone and their brother is trying to get Malik Murphy to enter the portal in May. He decides against it, but there was a real possibility that Malik Murphy wasn't going to be on the Texas team, all because of what he did in the spring game a couple weeks earlier. It was a real possibility. And then it carried over all the way into the latter part of the season, and Malik Murphy ends up getting in the portal, leaving the team prior to them competing in the Sugar Bowl. That was the national championship semifinal prior to last year. So Malik Murphy, all that buzz and attention he was getting in May, didn't stop, didn't slow down. First opportunity people had to get him in the portal, he ended up going, and he had to leave the team as a result. So he wasn't around for the national championship. So had Quinn Ewers gotten hurt, God forbid, it would have been Arch Manning that would have come off the bench to become the backup and lead the team to victory if the opportunity presented itself. So this all started a couple of years ago when it's basically, if you have a guy that shows up and balls out in the spring game, you're exposing him. You're really exposing him. And that, I think, is really unfortunate. Now, we got to get tampering under control. And Matt Rule has said, tampering doesn't exist, right? He hit the nail on the head. Tampering it's free agency. Whether you like it or not, it is. And I'm not saying I have a problem with it. I just hate that there are as many bad actors in the player representation world where they will tell a guy to go get in the portal because some coach had kind of asked, but they really didn't ask for that guy specifically. Some coach goes to an agent, says, we need a safety. And all of a sudden, this agent goes and tells 10 guys, hey, get in the portal. This team needs a safety. And now 10 guys are in the portal, but only one gets the job. So 9 guys are now in the portal with nowhere else to go because this agent misled 10 players. So I hate that aspect of it, but I also acknowledge that having a spring game only highlights what these guys might be capable of and makes them even more attractive to a team that might be desperate to add a player at that position. We also know that these spring games are big time for the television networks. Big Ten Network last year, they were the ones that broadcasted Nebraska's spring game. And after Nebraska's spring game, there were 2 scholarship players that entered the portal after the spring because of what they did in the spring game. Raekwon Buckley went to Michigan State, and Chief Borders went to Pitt. So I'm not accusing, by the way, Michigan State and Pitt of tampering. I'm just suggesting that Nebraska lost players because of a spring game performance last year. That performance, by the way, also attracted 60,000 plus people, and a lot of people on the Big Ten Network watched that game. So that's a huge problem. 31 players from Nebraska entered the transfer portal after the 2024 season. 12 of those 31, have already landed at other Power 4 programs. So I don't really blame Matt Rule for saying, hey guys, we're going to keep this kind of in-house. We're going to compete and we're going to do the best we can in the 14 practices that are not public, but we're not going to have a spring game because we don't want to basically create an opportunity for our guys to go potentially get picked off by other teams. The other thing that's also a problem with spring games is that injuries are an issue. You already have a roster that's potentially shrinking to 105 players because of the NCAA versus the House settlement deal. So with shrinking rosters, you're probably going to see less and less contact, which means less and less contact means less injuries. So that's something to be mindful of as well. But I'm bummed about it, man. Spring games are awesome. They're something to look forward to, and they're great for the fans. It's cheap. In some cases, it's free. In most cases, it's free to go and watch your favorite team on a beautiful sunny afternoon in April. Now that could be going away is unfortunate, but I get it. If I were a coach, I'm not sure I want to expose the guys to the publicity that would be potentially garnered with a great spring game performance. Does that hurt the player? Yeah, it does kind of, but at the same time, it helps the team. And if I'm the coach, my job is to take care of the team over any one individual. So can't say I blame Matt Rule, but it is unfortunate because it does take away from the 60,000 plus people's experience to go celebrate Nebraska football at some point in the spring.